Hello. Yep, that's me. I'm happy that you dared to join the JSON presentation on the Java conference. If trolling is an art, that might be a part of it. So we will be talking about falling in love with JSON. You probably wonder why, what for, is it worth it? And there's a long answer and there's a short answer. The short answer is just don't fall in love with that, and thank you. That's pretty much sums up the presentation. But more seriously, as we have another 29 minutes to go, we will be talking about falling in love with JSONnet. So what's JSONnet? Is it like JSON.net, as Microsoft did C.net? Or something like this. We'll find out, but to fully understand what we'll be talking about, we need a little bit of history, a funny, interesting history. I assume that all of you know what's JSON, or come across that at least once in your career and never want to come back. So, it's pronounced JSON. That's what Douglas Crockford wrote on one of the groups when he invented it, because that's a data format that was invented roughly around 2000, so it has 25 years. First use 2001, there was an RFC for that. Yes. In 2006, there was another RFC about the application meta type, application JSON. And then in 2013, there was yet another RFC about JSON JavaScript object notation. So you can say 13 years, somebody moved from junior to principal in 13 years. That's quite an achievement. That's quite a legged career path, even in IT. So what is this JSON? It was supposed to be a lightweight, text-based, language-independent data interchange format. So a way to put some data and ship it over to somebody else doing a different language. 20 years ago, it was a thing. Java was doing serialization and was sending serialized objects over to other Java applications, and then had all of the funny things trying to unserialize it or deserialize it. So that was an interesting thing. Though, for me, and I'll prove it to you, it was more of a write once, read never thing. I never ever wanted to cope with the same JSON file again. I'd rather write it from scratch. And I have a few points to prove it. If you ever did a dashboard for CloudWatch, that might have been a JSON file that you had to work with. Or with Grafana, similar, 800 lines of code. That's a lot of JSON that you had to cope with just to do a single dashboard. Even from this very short scan, you see a lot of repetitions. And then if you did AWS with Java, that's something you probably encountered with. So putting a policy document into your Java document being a JSON with some string formatting thing. If we had modern Java, that might have looked like this, but most of us, or in many cases, we didn't have that fancy tools like formats and text blocks. So we did something like this, and that's more of a JSON file I used to have in my applications, unfortunately. A classic Java and JSON, usually in situations that we had this old application, it was happily talking XML over SOAP or any other classic protocol, and somebody came across and said, hey, we want to this data but in JSON. And you had to slap a lot of JSON onto your application. You ended up with something like this. But that's not all. In our JSON words across all the languages, we usually have to deploy it at some point or to do something about it. And we said, okay, this is all repetitions. We keep having the same blocks of JSON in our app. let's try to template it. And obviously, we did it. I did it in a way that my dashboards were handled through my Terraform, and there was a very ugly code of a Terraform that tried to replace certain keys, certain strings to have a template out of JSON. That never really worked. It was a disaster, and I kind of hated it. And I hated myself for doing it. And I kept hating myself for thinking that this time I will do those templates better. Until I signed a pact with the devil, and I decided we can do better. And yeah, that will be part about JSONnet, where I turned all those kilobytes or megabytes of JSON into something manageable. But before we get there, I assume everybody uses JSON. Why you hate JSON? Not talk why you hate JavaScript, but why you hate JSON. I have a few points if you relate to that. I hate for lack of comments. That I have this block, and I usually put another text block into my JSON to comment what I've just put in my JSON. Those are just stupid. And there are no variables. Sometimes I would like to put a variable in my JSON to refer it throughout the document, because that's just, makes sense. And there is no multi-line string support. I have to do all those funny things with the next line. That's ridiculous. And I keep duplicating everything, always, throughout the document. Having the same things all and over again. It just makes me furious. But as I promised, there is a better word, and we can try to embrace it. There is a library coming from Google called JSONnet. And they claim to solve all those problems, and I'll first run you through some of the examples, and then we'll see how you can really apply it in your application like a real world example. So this is a JSON file, and this is an equivalent of a JSONnet file. These are examples coming from the JSONnet website, just to give you a little bit of familiarity what we are talking about. So you can see we have comments, and we have multi-line strings, and it still looks like JSON. Okay, it's not interpreted directly through like a browser. There is an additional library that parses it to JSON, but we can use it. Another thing, and then we have variables. We can put something local or less local, a variable into our document, and then refer it throughout the document. Okay, that makes a little bit sense. And then that's very ugly. But these are calculations. We can do calculations. We can self-refer blocks of JSON file and reuse it or use it in other attributes of our file. And then we have a standard library to iterate through some blocks or some attributes or some values or some data, because it's a data interact. It's a data-oriented format. So there's a promise somebody made that it will make our life not that hard. Another example of JSON, and then we can do functions. We can define the functions in our JSON file and then use it to evaluate whatever we are willing to do. So that sounds a little bit crazy to me at first point. I felt like somebody just made a programming language out of a data structure of another language. And as long as you're just reading about it, it sounds promising. But then when you're trying to use it on production, that's getting dangerous, or they might get scary, but it's not. So let's think, or let's conceptualize more of a real-world example. Who's monitoring applications they're supporting? Like have some CloudWatch, Grafana, or any other thing. Okay, and then you do dashboards, right? You do dashboards. You have your own dashboards that you kind of build. Yes? I hope you do. Please do. The default dashboards tells you not much. So let's imagine we have this service, our production cluster service, blah, 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 whatever. And we are running tens of similar services, or we are running everything on Java stack. So all our services have some different parts, like business-oriented metrics. That's something that tells you that this service works properly. And then we have a bunch of metrics that are pretty much the same across all the services, like uptime, like when it started, what's the heap size, what's the memory size, what's the CPU utilization, and so on and so forth. These are things that, regardless whether the app is written in Java or in Python, I have it. Regardless whether it's written in Java Spring or Java Quarkus or whatever Java framework, I have certain set of metrics always on my dashboard, just to know that we are on the same page with our applications. And then there are some additional things depending on service, like database pools, queries, execution times, and so on and so forth. But again, I keep repeating those throughout the applications. But that's kind of a template I try to use across my apps. So when I open the dashboard, it looks roughly like this. And then I will work through the CloudWatch AWS world, not because CloudWatch is the best tool for dashboard. It is not, but it's simple enough that there will be nothing between us and the dashboard in terms of a magic thing that different vendors come up with. So to define a dashboard in CloudWatch, you have to say, okay, these are my widgets, and it's an array of widgets. We will not talk about how the JSON for widget is constructed, but that's roughly the thing. We can say that it's a JSON file, but we can say it's a JSONnet file. And if we say we want to use JSONnet, the path to go from one word to another, so to get JSONnet into a JSON, is a library called JSONnet, and it kind of compiles it. No, it doesn't. It just transpiles it to standard JSON notation. We'll see it live in a second, but I just don't want to jump between screens. So our dashboard usually, or my dashboard usually looks like this. That I have a widget at the beginning. I have a title. You have seen the quick facts, and then there is another widget from CloudWatch, which is metrics, and there is an expression to get it out of the metrics, some height, length, sizes, which region, and so on and so forth. This is JSON, which used to be copied from dashboard to dashboard. And when we come across, or when I come across, that I would like to change the namespace, or I would like to add something to my namespace, I had to change it across all the applications. It was ridiculous. But it was copy and pasted. Can we do better? Of course we can. A very small change. This is still JSON. This is exactly the same JSON as we had previously. See? Same JSON. But we put it into something that is not JSON, which is a template. And that's a JSONnet thing. So we decide we've built a second file, let's say a dependency or an import that defines a template like this. And then we can use the template, just import something into our dashboard, saying that just use this quick facts template, and then we can compile it. Still looks mostly like JSON. And then we can start using variables, because across our dashboards, we have this thing like a variable, which was the service name. And regardless whether my service was called foo or bar or whatever else, I wanted its process uptime. So I wanted it to be a variable. And then region was also a variable, because sometimes we deployed into US West, and sometimes into US East, and sometimes to Europe. So it was also a variable. So I start to move things around. And then I could have put into my template a region and a namespace. So my template could have arguments and then rendered my JSON accordingly. I was starting to get sane. And then I can use it in my dashboard. So I said, put quick facts here, and put a region and a namespace. And JSONnet will tell me, I don't know what's the region and the namespace, because that's not a defined variable in your dashboard. Well, that's true. I haven't defined it. So I can even put my JSON, so far it was treated as a JSON, into a function, into another data structure, and tell, okay, this is a function, you will evaluate it, you'll have a region, you will have a namespace, you can provide a default values on your top level functions, and we can move like this. So we can start to assemble things, which is pretty neat. Can we do better? Well, so far JSONnet told us, okay, you have data structures, you have functions you can evaluate, you can build in functions, kind of a standard library, you can have templating out of the box, and you can do some even assertions. So maybe, if I'm misusing the data interchange language and building a programming language on the top of that, I can build in some logic or validation into my dashboard, because why not? So in my dashboard, you've seen this before, I had this quick facts, and then I have alarms. So when you deploy an alarm in a CloudWatch, which is very CloudWatch specific, but you need to provide resource identifier, so-called ARN from AWS, which is your alarm. So we can have another template, which I'll show you in a second, with alarms, and then I can put namespaces as previously, and a set of alarms that I want to put on my dashboard. Alarms set up for this specific application. And one of the things that quite frequently happened, some engineers just used the alarms from their Terraform scripts, and there were like outputs. So it was legged ARM. But some engineers tried to hand type it, because dependencies are hard, so you can just copy and paste it from the console, and that very often didn't work. So what you can do, you can write within your dashboard thingy a function that will represent an ARN and validate it, because you have a full programming language in your JSON. Why not? So we have this ARN thing that takes a string and goes, funny enough, Java SDK is doing validation of ARN exactly in the same way. Just parse it step by step and see if it's have the correct part. So that's an implementation in a JSONnet. So we take each part of an ARN, and then we can return as a whole data structure with all the resources that we needed, with all the parts that we are interested in within our JSON, within our dashboard logic. That's pretty crazy, but it works. And if it works and it's crazy, it ain't crazy. So we have an ARN with validation and some attributes, and then we can refer it throughout our application in our dashboard. Sounds crazy. Okay, so let's do some copy and pasting of the output and see if it's really work. Because I just showed you a couple of slides, and you have to believe me that I haven't just invented it on my way here, which I was tempted, but I didn't. And it's a fully blessed live certified demo, so let's try to do it live. Now everything might break. Yes. Okay. Yes. Perfect. So this is my console. I have a number of files here, exactly what I've been referring to during the presentation. So we have our service dashboard, which looks like, oh, that looks ugly. Slightly better, which looks like this. That's exactly what you've seen on slides. And then we have the, sorry, I see. Doing it live never works perfectly. And we have this library, so-called, where I have those samples of my templates. So if I go to JSONnet as I promised earlier, I can do something like this. So I have JSONnet and my file name. I will start with that. And it renders my dashboard, my template, into a fully working JSON. Or fully working JSON, that's crazy. Like JSON. What you can see is that I have a few things like default region, which is US West 1, or I have my service namespace, which is not a real thing. So I would like to replace it in my transpilation process. So what I can do is this previous snippet. So I have some top-level arguments, strings. That's how JSONnet refers to, and I can provide a region, which is US West 2 right now, and my service name, which is curator. And that way, I have a different JSON. So the templating really works. But then you can ask, okay, but what can I do with that? It's just a bunch of JSON file that you have on your own computer. How we can ship it? So there are two ways. There is a bad way, but again, it works, so it's not that bad. If I copy it to a clipboard and then open CloudWatch console, I'll create a new dashboard. I'll type it, I'll call it test dashboard. As created. I will skip the yada yada from AWS. View edit source. You have an empty widget. Now you have the full dashboard, which I just copy and pasted from my console, and it works. This is actually a service underneath that has 146 hours of uptime. Copy and pasting doesn't really make sense, but we'll get to that later. The same way, we have the alarms thingy. So I have my JSONnet with an alarms that there is an arm of a real app, one of the alarms, an ARN. And the snippet I've shown you, so pretty much ARN validation. I can show you that it really works. So I can do JSON ARN. These are alarms. It compiles, it outputs some alarms. You see, it's changed. I can go and break it. This is not an ARN. You see, it's not an ARN. No partition specified in your ARN. So the validation really works. I can do some logic in my dashboard. Crazy, not crazy, it works. So I have my alarm with dashboard. Okay, I'll copy and paste it to my dashboard. You see, I have an alarm and I have new two elements just out of copy and pasting. Some people stop here because they say, okay, that's much better than what I used to do, and I'm fine with copy and pasting the dashboards to my whatever console I've been using, and I've been there as well. If you had to deal with JSON files, that's like a breath of fresh air, and you can live with this copy and pasting. But we are engineers. We're not happy with half-baked solutions. So if I only make it, yes. Not exactly what I wanted. No, this is hard. I'm an engineer, I'm not a presentation thingy. That's what I need. There probably is a shortcut for that, but I never remember. Okay, so we've seen a demo. We kind of did the interpret and deploy through copy and pasting. That's a fun thing to do, but that's never enough. So we had the CLI. which we used. Okay. But we can also do like Terraform, because I use Terraform to deploy my application that manages my infrastructure as code, and dashboard is a part of my infrastructure because it's kind of hand in hand with my application. So there is a Terraform provider for JSON, for JSONnet, and the way it works is I have a data part from my JSON template where I defined top-level arguments, whether it's a code, whether it's a string, and the source of my file, so the locations. And then I deploy it as an AWS CloudWatch resource. The same it works for others, tooling like Grafana and so on and so forth. So yes, we can use it like this and manage our JSONs through infrastructure and as code. That's actually how I use it on the daily basis. Okay. Now the important questions. That was a semi-fun presentation. You know, feels odd. Sometimes you go to a zoo to see odd things like animals from the other part of the world. Sometimes you go to a presentation to see somebody doing a programming language out of JSON. Do people even use it? In fact, yes, because there is something called Grafana, which is a JSONnet library built by Grafana to do exactly what I showed you on a higher scale in Grafana. Sometimes I feel like they're crazy, but maybe not that crazy. So yes, you have Grafana, which helps you building the same kind of a dashboards within a Grafana. You might wonder, but you know, there must be a lot of logic in those kind of dashboards, functions, and so on. Are they even tested? Yes, there's already a JSONnet test unit, test library that helps you or aids you doing that. So yes, people are trying to do something about it, and it actually turns out to be a little bit funny. Thank you very much. I hope you find it a little bit useful, or at least a little bit entertaining. After I've given this presentation a couple of weeks ago, the feedback was, this is crazy. And then after another few weeks, I got an email, hey, can you send the link to this presentation? Because actually, I think I'm going to use it. Maybe you will find it helpful. Thank you very much.
All systems are nominal. Initialize Genesis sequence.